Have you ever felt the rough grain of a dry wooden staff in your hand and wondered if God could still call a life that feels worn smooth by waiting? Chosen one, before the fire, before the sea, before the voice that would shake a nation, there was a man standing in dust. Sand pressed against his sandals, the wind carried that dry desert smell, and the only sound around him was the faint shuffle of sheep moving across stone. This was Moses, far from the palace, far from applause, far from anything that looked like destiny. And yet heaven had not lost his address. You may be in a season like that right now. Maybe your prayers feel delayed. Maybe grief has sat in your chest like a weight. Maybe you've known rejection, lack, confusion, or the kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. But hear this with your spirit wide awake. Hidden does not mean forgotten. The chapter does not begin with a prince on a throne. It begins with a shepherd in a wilderness. That matters. Because the Lord has a way of meeting people where the world stopped expecting anything from them. This same man had been spared as a baby when danger was hunting Hebrew sons. He had been hidden, carried, drawn from the river, and raised in Pharaoh's household, preserved before he ever understood why. But preservation is only the beginning. There comes a moment when the God who kept you starts to reveal what he kept you for. And for him, that moment was closer than the next breath. If this word is already speaking to you, like the video and stay with me. That preserved beginning did not lead him into a simple life. The child who had once been tucked away from danger grew up where polished stone stayed cool underfoot, where servants moved through echoing halls, where the smell of oil and linen hung in the air. He was raised in Pharaoh's household, yet the blood in his veins told another story. Chosen one, do you see it? He lived close to power, but he could not escape the cry of his own people. Sometimes God will let you stand between two worlds so you learn that comfort is not the same as calling. And maybe that touches your life more than you expected. You can be surrounded by people and still feel set apart. You can have a roof over your head and still carry unrest in your spirit. You can smile in public, work hard, pay bills, answer messages, and yet deep down know, I do not fully belong to what everyone else seems satisfied with. That tension is not always failure. Sometimes it is the first stirring of assignment. Acts chapter 7 points back to this man and shows that something was already forming in him before the wilderness ever came. The Lord was allowing him to see, to feel, to notice what others ignored. But when inner burden grows heavy, it does not stay quiet forever. And the man preserved from the river was moving toward a moment that would break his old life open. That breaking point came when what he saw outside finally matched what had been building inside. The air was hot, dust clung to skin, and the cries of oppressed people were no longer something he could keep at a distance. He had grown up near authority, but now the ache in him rose higher than the comfort around him. Chosen one, there are moments when the burden God has allowed you to feel becomes too sharp to ignore. You can sit in the nice room, wear the right face, keep everything tidy on the outside, and still know something is deeply wrong. For him, that moment did not lead to applause. It led to collapse. One desperate act, one turning point, and the life he had known could no longer hold him. The doors of the palace were no longer his shelter. The place that once looked secure became the place he had to leave behind. And some of you know that feeling. A bad decision, a fearful reaction, a season where one moment seemed to undo years. You have asked, did I ruin what God intended? But hear me carefully. Your failure is not stronger than God's purpose. Acts chapter 7 shows the tension, but Exodus chapter 2 shows the movement. He fled. The stone halls gave way to open land. The smell of river water faded into the dry breath of the desert. And what looked like exile to human eyes was becoming training in God's hands. Because the next place this reluctant yet chosen man would live was not a throne room, but Midian. Midian did not look like recovery at first. It smelled like sun-baked earth and animal wool. The mornings came cool, then the heat settled over the hills until everything shimmered. The man who had known carved walls and guarded spaces was now learning open skies, rough ground, and the slow rhythm of herding sheep. Exodus chapter 2 lets you feel the turn without needing many words. He fled, he settled, he stayed. And chosen one, some seasons with God do not begin with celebration. They begin with quiet. That quiet can trouble you if you do not understand it. You may think, if the Lord has favor on my life, why does everything feel so ordinary? Why am I doing small work, hidden work, work no one applauds? But the hidden field is not empty. In that place, hands become steady, ears learn to listen, pride gets worn down, hurry loses its grip. The man who once moved fast enough to break his own life open was now walking at the pace of sheep. About 40 years passed there. Not 40 noisy years, not 40 public years, but 40 years of distance from the place he had known. Long enough for memories to age, long enough for a wound to scar over, long enough to think perhaps this was all his life would be. But heaven had not closed the book on him. Out there, with dust on his feet and a staff in his hand, he was being prepared for a meeting he could not yet imagine. That meeting did not arrive with thunder first. It came on an ordinary day, with the smell of dry brush in the air and the scrape of sandals over uneven ground. He was leading the flock farther out, doing what he had done so many times before, when something caught his eye. A bush was burning, but the branches did not curl black, and the fire did not eat the wood. The flame held there, bright against the wilderness, alive and still. Exodus chapter 3 gives it to us plain, and plain is powerful. Chosen one, do not miss this. God did not call him while he was chasing noise. He called him while he was being faithful in the small task in front of him. Some of you are waiting for the Lord to speak after you arrive somewhere bigger, richer, easier, more visible. But sometimes heaven interrupts you right in the middle of routine, right in the work you thought was beneath your destiny, right in the season you almost called wasted. And the man did something simple that changed everything. He turned aside to see. That is a word for you. Not everyone notices the holy moment set before them. Some rush past it. Some explain it away. Some are too wounded, too distracted, too tired to pause. But when he leaned toward that fire, he stepped closer to the edge of his old life. Because the flame was not there just to be seen. It was there to speak his name. And when the voice came, it came with both tenderness and weight. From the middle of that fire, he heard his name called twice. Known. The ground under him was no longer just dirt and stone. It was holy because the presence of God had filled that place. So he stopped. He listened. He stood there in the hush of that moment, with the heat of the flame before him and the desert air still around him. Chosen one, there are seasons when you think heaven is silent, and then suddenly the Lord speaks in a way that leaves no doubt that he sees you. Exodus chapter 3 tells us that God had seen the affliction of his people and heard their cry. That matters. The call on this shepherd's life was not built on ego, it was built on mercy. The Lord was moving toward those in bondage, toward those under pressure, toward those who had groaned so long they may have wondered if anyone heard at all. And maybe that is where you are right now, carrying bills, grief, fear, loneliness, family strain, disappointment, or a private ache nobody else understands. God still hears cries in hard places. But then came the turn that must have made his breath catch. The God who revealed his heart also revealed his plan. And the man standing barefoot in the wilderness was about to learn that he would not only witness deliverance, he would be sent into it. That sending was the part he did not reach for. He could stand near the flame and listen to the heart of God for the suffering people. He could hear that deliverance was coming. But when the Lord made it personal, when the assignment moved from "I have seen" to "I am sending you," the weight of it landed hard. Chosen one. That is where many people begin to tremble. It is one thing to pray for change. It is another thing to realize heaven wants to use your life in the answer. So the questions came. Who am I? What if they do not listen? What if my past rises up before me? What if the place I left is still waiting to remind me of every failure? Exodus chapter 3 lets you hear the shaking in his voice without mocking him. This was a man who had lived in obscurity for years. The shepherd's smell was on his clothes, desert wind on his skin, and suddenly he was being told to walk back toward the place he had fled. Maybe you know that feeling too. You want breakthrough, but not exposure. You want open doors, but not the courage it takes to step through them. You want favor, but not the surrender that comes before it. Yet the Lord did not withdraw the call because of his fear. Instead, God answered the insecurity with presence. And the next words would shift everything from "Who am I?" to "Who is with me?" That answer was, "I will be with you," not "You are strong enough." And chosen one, that changes everything. Because when God speaks purpose over your life, he does not always remove the shaking in your hands first. He answers it with his presence. Exodus chapter 3 does not flatter the man standing there. It anchors him. The call was bigger than his history, bigger than his weakness, bigger than the years that had passed in silence. Still, the questions kept rising. He worried about being believed. He worried about speaking. He worried about returning to the place connected to old fear. And if you are honest, maybe you understand that kind of resistance. You can feel God nudging you toward a conversation, a step, a change, a move, a new obedience. And at the same time, feel your chest tighten with all the reasons you think you cannot do it. Then the Lord asked him something simple. What is that in your hand? Exodus chapter 4. What was already in his grip, not what was in a palace vault, not what another man carried, not what he wished he had. That weathered staff, smooth from use, ordinary to his own eyes. The same tool from long days with sheep was about to become a sign that heaven can place power on what looks small. And once that question was asked, the quiet years in Midian began to look different, because the thing he thought was only for tending would soon be lifted in front of Pharaoh himself. That staff was more than a tool now. He had leaned on it through long miles, used it to guide stubborn sheep, held it in the silence of ordinary days. The wood would have felt familiar in his palm, worn smooth in places, rough in others, carrying the dust of Midian. And now the Lord was showing him that what had served him in obscurity could carry a sign in public. Chosen one, do not despise what God has placed in your hand just because it looks simple. Heaven has a way of touching the ordinary until it opens doors no human strength could move. Exodus chapter 4 makes that moment plain. He was taking what this man already carried and setting his power upon it. That is a word for you if you have felt overlooked, under-resourced, behind, or unprepared. Your experience, your endurance, your prayers through lonely nights, your hard lessons, even your tears in hidden seasons, none of it is wasted when God decides to breathe on it. So the fear did not vanish all at once, but the assignment became clearer. He would go back, not as the man who once ran, but as one sent. Not with his own authority, but under the word of the Lord. The road ahead still held tension, resistance, and the memory of what had happened before. And yet the desert was behind him now, in a new way, because every step from that mountain would carry him back toward Pharaoh. That return was not a small thing. Every mile back carried memory. The air changed, the ground changed, and with each step, the old place came closer. The place tied to fear, failure, and everything he had once left behind. Chosen one, obedience can feel like that. Walking back toward the very place where you once felt exposed, not toward something new and easy. And still, when God sends you, you do not have the luxury of staying where you feel safest. He was going back with a word from the Lord and that staff in his hand, not with polished confidence. Exodus chapter 4 and chapter 5 move with that weight. This was a reluctant yet chosen man, returning not because the path felt comfortable, but because the voice of God had made it clear. Some of you are in that kind of moment now. You are being called to revisit a hard conversation, a delayed assignment, a dream you buried, a place of healing you kept postponing. And let me tell you something gently. Breakthrough often stands on the other side of the step you least want to take. So he went, no longer a runaway, but under instruction. No longer hidden in a basket or sheltered in Midian, moving straight toward a throne that had once defined his world. The doors of power were in front of him again. And this time, he was coming to speak a demand Pharaoh would not want to hear. That demand was simple, but it was not easy. He stood before Pharaoh with the memory of desert wind still on him, and the word of God in his mouth. Let the people go. Speak it. Do not negotiate around it, soften it, or hide it. Chosen one, this is where many hearts grow tired. You obey, you pray, you finally step through the door God opened, and the resistance in front of you does not move right away. The room stays hard. The faces stay cold. The answer stays no. Exodus chapter 5 shows that obedience does not always produce instant comfort. Sometimes it exposes the hardness you were sent to confront. Pharaoh was not impressed by the history of this shepherd. He was not persuaded by human weakness. But the assignment had never rested on human charm. It rested on the command of the Lord. That matters for you too. If God sent you, the first rejection is not the final word. Still, let's be honest about the weight of it. When pressure increases after obedience, people start asking questions. Did I hear God right? Why did this get harder? Why does the door still look shut? Why does breakthrough seem delayed? But a closed face is not the same as a closed heaven. The one who met him in fire had not lost control inside the palace. Resistance was rising, yes, but so was the stage for God to reveal that no ruler, no fear, no hardened heart could hold forever what he had marked for release. And in time, what God had spoken began to break the grip of that resistance. Not all at once, not in the tidy way people imagine, but steadily, unmistakably, under the hand of the Lord. The one who had once trembled in Midian was now leading people out from under a long season of pressure. Can you feel the shift? Sand under many feet, urgent movement, families gathering what they could carry, the air thick with relief, but also with uncertainty. Because, chosen one, when bondage starts to loosen, freedom can feel strange at first. That is true in your life too. You pray for release from fear, from debt, from toxic patterns, from grief that keeps choking your joy, from the weight of old shame. And then God begins to move. And suddenly you are not where you were, but you are not settled yet either. That middle place can test your faith. It can make you wonder if breakthrough is real just because the road still feels unsettled. Exodus chapter 13 and chapter 14 carry that kind of tension. The people were moving, yes, but the journey was not soft. The appointed deliverer was no longer only standing before a throne, he was walking before a people who needed direction every step of the way. And then the pressure changed shape. What had been left behind began to close in from one side, and ahead of them was water. No bridge, no easy path, no clear escape. Just a crowd, a leader, a staff, and a moment that looked impossible. That impossible moment is where fear usually gets loudest. The sound of water was in front of them, wide and blocking the way. Behind them, pressure was closing in. You can almost hear it. People breathing faster, feet shifting in the sand, panic moving through the crowd like wind through dry grass. And there he stood, the same man who had once asked, "Who am I?" Now he had a people looking at him, and no visible road ahead. Chosen one, some of the hardest moments in your life will come after God has already moved for you. Exodus chapter 14 gives us that holy tension. This was the kind of scene that makes human strength feel useless. And maybe that speaks to where you are. Bills on one side, grief on another, family strain, exhaustion, closed options, unanswered questions. And you are standing there thinking, "Lord, I obeyed. Why does it still look impossible?" Because sometimes God waits until the path is truly shut to human hands before he reveals his own. Then came the instruction: lift the staff, stretch out the hand, move in obedience before the way appears. That is a hard word, but a powerful one. He did not part the waters through panic. He responded to the voice he had already learned to trust, from Midian, from the mountain, from the place of fire. And when that staff was raised over the sea, creation itself was about to answer the God who sent him. And creation did answer. The wind rose, hard and steady. The water that had looked like a wall of defeat became a passage under the command of God. Exodus chapter 14 does not give us a clever escape plan. It gives us a miracle, a way in the wilderness, a path where no path had been visible a moment before. Chosen one, this is why you cannot judge your future by what your natural eyes see too early. The Lord can make room where pressure said there was none. Can you imagine the sound of it? Wind driving through the night, wet ground under hurried feet, children clinging close, faces turning from terror to stunned disbelief as the way opened before them. The staff that had guided sheep in lonely years was now lifted over waters for a nation. What God had touched in secret was carrying breakthrough in public. And maybe that is the word you need right now. The thing God trained in private, your endurance, your prayer life, your obedience when nobody noticed, your refusal to quit in the middle of pain, may be the very thing he uses when others around you cannot yet see how they will make it through. But listen carefully. Crossing through a miracle is not the same as arriving at the promise. The water opened, yes. The people moved, yes. Relief came, yes. But the God who brings you out will also shape you on the road ahead. And on the other side of that sea, the long wilderness was already waiting. That road on the other side was longer than many would have hoped. The wilderness had its own sound: sandals over grit, tents shifting in the wind, low voices at night, questions rising by morning. The people were no longer trapped where they had been, but they were not standing in the promise yet either. And there he was, carrying more than a staff now. He was carrying the strain of leading weary hearts through a place that could feel dry, slow, and stretching. Chosen one, this is where many people misunderstand favor. They think if God opens a sea, there should never be another hard day. But the Lord who delivers also develops. The man who had stood before Pharaoh now had to stand among hungry, tired, uncertain people for years. Numbers chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 1 let you feel some of that weight. Leadership was holy, yes, but it was heavy too. Maybe you know that burden in your own life. You are praying for your family while trying not to fall apart yourself. You are showing up for others while your own heart feels thin. You are paying bills, making decisions, carrying responsibility, smiling when needed, and whispering to God when no one sees how tired you really are. That kind of carrying is real. Yet even there, the same Lord who met him in fire stayed with him in the long middle. And that may be the deepest test of all. Not whether you can say yes in one powerful moment, but whether you can keep saying yes when the miracle becomes a journey. That long middle is where this story starts reaching straight into your own. Because his life was never only about one man in one time. It is also a mirror. Hidden as a baby, formed in a palace he could not fully belong to, emptied in the desert, called by fire, sent back in fear, strengthened by God, and carried through the wilderness. Every part of that path speaks. Chosen one, your hidden season is not empty. Your ordinary tools are not useless. Your fear does not cancel your calling, and your wilderness does not mean the promise has died. Look at how the Lord worked with him, not by rushing him, not by discarding him, not by demanding perfection before assignment. The God of Exodus chapter 3 said, "I will be with you." The God of Isaiah chapter 43 says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you." It is the same heartbeat. Presence before ease, purpose before comfort, grace even in process. So if you are facing delay, heartbreak, family stress, financial pressure, weariness, old shame, confusion about direction, or the ache of carrying too much for too long, do not call yourself finished. Heaven is still able to open what looks shut. There is still favor for the one who feels overlooked. There is still strength for the one who feels thin. But a word like this should not stay in your chest as a passing feeling. It must turn into agreement. And before this message is over, you are going to have to decide what you will say back to God. That decision is closer than you think. Because after a story like this, you cannot just admire the man and move on. You have to answer the God who met him. Will you keep calling your season wasted when heaven may be using it? Will you keep despising the staff in your hand, the small responsibility, the quiet gift, the prayer life nobody sees, the endurance built through tears, when the Lord may yet breathe on it? Chosen one, this is the moment to come into agreement with what God has been whispering to you. Say it in your heart if you need to. Lord, I will not run from the wilderness. I will not call myself forgotten. I will not bow to fear more than I bow to your voice. That is not empty emotion. That is alignment. Joshua chapter 1 says, "Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." The same presence that steadied that shepherd still steadies people now. So if you have been carrying grief, delay, money trouble, family strain, exhaustion, or the sting of old mistakes, do not leave this word sitting on the surface. Let it go deeper. Let it become your yes. And if this message has stirred something real in you, don't keep that agreement silent. Let it be known, even if it's just a simple, "I receive it." Because in the next moment, we are not just going to talk about his story anymore. We are going to place your own burden before the same God who called him by name. So now, chosen one, let us do what that story has been leading us toward all along. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, you who watched over Moses in the reeds, met him in fire, steadied him with a staff, and carried him through long miles of dust, look on your people now. For the one who feels hidden, breathe hope. For the one crushed by bills, grief, family strain, loneliness, exhaustion, or fear, stretch out your hand again. Let the God of the burning bush speak into dry places. Let the Lord of Exodus chapter 14 make room where none is visible. Be near to the weary. Be strength to the trembling. Be peace in the night watches. And we declare together, what you preserved will not be wasted. What you planted in secret will not die in the sand. The hand that once trembled can still be used. The feet that feel tired can still keep walking. The door that has not moved yet is not beyond your command. You are still able to lead, still able to provide, still able to bring a people through. A shepherd's stick lifted over dark water looked small, until the wind obeyed. Later, when camp settled and the ground cooled under evening air, there would still be sand in their sandals and miles yet to go. But there was also this: they had seen enough to keep walking. If this prayer is yours, write, "Still leading me." And if this word found you in your own wilderness, pass it on to someone who needs that fire tonight.